The Mesnevi, usually known as the Mesneviya Sharif or Holy Mesnevi of Jalaluddin Muhammad Arumi. First, together with some account of the life and acts of the author, of his ancestors and his descendants, illustrated by a selection of characteristic anecdotes as collected by their historian, Mevlana Shamsuddin Ahmed El Aflaki El Arifi, translated and the poetry versified by James W. Redhouse, MRAS, etc., in London of 1881. And there's some medallions or dents of the book. So we're going to have 9 chapters of anecdotes after the preface. And then we're going to have another preface with book 1. And we're going to have 16 tales. So the historian El-Aflaki was this disciple of Chalebi Emir Arif, a grandson of the author of the Mesnevi. Arif died in 1320 of the Common Era, but as the dates of Arif's successors are carried down to Al-Hijra 754, 1353 of the Common Era, when Aflaki's collection of anecdotes was compiled, the historian must have outlived this last date. As a disciple of Emir Arif, he was a dervish of the order named Mevlevi, as being followers of the rule and practices of Mevlana Jalaluddin Arumi, commonly known in English literature as the Dancing Dervishes, expressed by Americans, whirling dervishes. The dervishes of the order do not all dance or whirl. Some are musicians and some singers or chanters who may, however, be occasional dancers also. Aflaki's work gives a sufficiency of dates to fix the principal events that he commemorates. His dates do not agree exactly with those found in other historians. They are, however, sufficiently near for general purposes, not of a chronologically critical nature. They commence with Al-Hijra 605 or 1208 of the Vulgar Era, and thus cover a period of about 145 years dated, besides another 30 years of the lifetime of Jalaluddin's grandfather, undated, who was a noble of such high standing and of so great a reputation for learning and sanctity at Balkh that the king gave him his only daughter in marriage unsolicited. His mother was also a princess of the same royal house with his wife. The royal house was the one known in history as that of Khwarezm Shah of the Khwarezmians. They were overthrown, and Balkh, the ancient Bactria, or Sariaspa, their capital destroyed by Genghis Khan in 1211 of the Common Era. A remnant of their kingdom was continued for 12 years longer by the last of the line, who died at once a fugitive and an invader in Azerbaijan in a battle fought against the combined forces of Egypt, Syria, and Asia Minor. Jalal's family claimed descent from Abu Bakr, a father-in-law and the first successor of Muhammad, the lawgiver of Islam. One of the descendants of Abu Bakr was among the conquerors of the ancient Bactria, when it was first brought under Muslim rule in about 650. More by conquering than force. Not even Genghis Khan could take over the place by, external army, right? Under the Caliph, Uthman and its children had maintained a prominent position in that country, possessed in great wealth until the time immediately preceding the eruption of Genghis. Jalal was the youngest of 3 children, being 2 sons born of the princes. His mother and Balkh, the eldest daughter, was already married and remained behind with her husband when her father and brothers left their native city sometime between 1208 and 1211 of the Common Era, in which the latter year they were at Baghdad. There is no further mention of Jalal's elder brother. Jalal was 5 years old when he left Balkh. By way of Baghdad, they went to Mecca, thence to Damascus, and next to Erzincan in Armenia, thence to Larenda in Asia Minor. Jalal's mother was still with the party. He was now 18 years old and was married at Larenda to a lady named Yabher Pearl, daughter of a certain Lala Sharafuddin of Samarkand. In 1228 of the Common Era, she bore him 2 sons there. Alauddin, afterwards killed in a tumult at Hanya, and Bahauddin, Sultan Balad, through whom the succession of the house was continued. She appears to have died rather young, for Jalal afterwards married another lady of Hanya, who outlived him, and by whom he had 2 other children, a son and a daughter. And chapter 3, number 69, is a variant on this. After the birth of Sultan Balad at Larenda, Jalal's father was invited to Konya by the Seljuki king, Alauddin Kubad, where he found a college, and where he died in 1231 of the Common Era. The king built a marble mausoleum over his grave with this date inscribed on it. The king himself died 5 years later in 1236 of the Common Era. At his father's death, Jalal went to Aleppo and Damascus for several years to study, and then returned to Konya, where he was appointed professor of 4 separate colleges. His reputation for learning and sanctity became very great. But before this journey to Damascus, he appears to have paid a visit to Larenda, for a former pupil of his father's at Balkh, who had become a great saint and anchoret, came to Konya to seek Jalal, and was the cause of his returning from Larenda to the capital. This was the Sheikh and Sayyid Burhanuddin, who became Jalal's spiritual teacher for some time. Dates given do not agree in the various branches of Aflaki's compilation, where he here gives a period of 9 years spiritual study at Konya under Burhan. After Burhan's instruction and departure from Konya to Caesarea, where he died, and after Jalal's studies at Aleppo and Damascus, with his subsequent return to Konya and appointment to the 4 colleges, another great saint came to visit Jalal at this later city. This was Shamsuddin of Tabriz, for whom Jalal conceived a very great friendship. He is mentioned in the Mesnevi several times in very high terms. He appears to have been exceedingly aggressive and domineering in his manner. This roused a fierce animosity against him, which at length broke out in a tumult. Jalal's eldest son, Alauddin, was killed or mortally hurt in this disturbance. The local police seized Shamsuddin in consequence, and he was never seen alive again by his friends. Jalal went himself to Damascus in hopes that he might have been sent away, or have got away privately. The effort was fruitless. Later traditions cause his corpse to have been recovered and buried at Konya, differing, however, as to the place of interment. When Jalaluddin found he required assistance in conducting all the various duties that fell on him, he selected first for that office his former fellow student, Sheikh Salahuddin Faroudin, Faroudun, surnamed Zerkub, the gold beater, from his business. He assisted Jalal for about 10 years and died in 1258. Now, one of the things that's actually said a bit more often is the idea that the son got jealous and there was a fight with Shamsuddin and his body was never found. But his son survived, I think, according to one of the versions. So that makes a little bit more sense, you could say. Although the other, you could say it's possible, whatever. Hassan Husamuddin, surnamed the son of Akiturk through his being descended from some man of celebrity of the name or designation of Akiturk. There appears to have been a large family of very influential men residing at Konya and other towns of Asia Minor, all calling themselves Aki and distinguished as Aki, Ahmed, Aki, Ashraf, etc. The word Aki in Arabic signifies my brother, just like, you know, in Turkish, speaking of Effendi and stuff, it's not always literal. It may also mean that one related to a brother, as a servant, a slave, a client, etc., some prince or some dervish brother of some religious order. Indeed, these very numerous individuals named Aki may have been each a brother of such a fraternity, even some industrial guild. 10 years after Hussam was taken as his assistant by Jalal, this latter was called to his rest in 1273 of the Common Era, December, and was buried in his father's mausoleum, leaving Hussam as his successor. But meanwhile, at Hussam's suggestion, and with himself as the first amanuensis thereof, the Mesnevi had been composed in 6 volumes, books or parts by Jalal. The second volume was commenced in 1263 of the Common Era. There had been an interval of 2 years between the completion of the first and this, caused by Hussam's grief at the death of his wife. The whole work is stated to contain 26,660 couplets. A 7th volume of book has also been attributed to the Mesnevi to make up that number to the 7 planets. Some say it was composed or collected by Sultan Veled. The anecdotes of Aflaki make mention of many hundreds of odes composed also by Jalal. Now, don't some people say that only the first 5 are authentic and 6 maybe? Yeah. But it's important if a Sufi order or some other order, political or otherwise, doesn't just pass things on through the family, but passes things on through disciplic succession, proving oneself, otherwise that thing is. He is said to have instituted this particular order of dervishes with their special dress, the Indian garb of mourning in memory of his murdered friend, Shamsuddin of Tabriz, and to have adopted the use of instrumental music, the flute, the rebeck, the drum, and the tambourine with singing or chanting as an accompaniment to the holy dance on account of the lethargic nature of the Romans. As a child is tempted to take a salutary medicine by exhibition of a little jam or honey, so Jalal judged that the Romans might be tempted to a devotional love of God through the bait of sweet sounds addressed to their outward senses. Dancing or twirling by dervishes was a much older date, as will be recollected in one of the tales of the Arabian Nights. Hussam died in 1284, just 10 years after his teacher Jalal, whose son Bahauddin Sultan Veled succeeded Hussam as chief of the order and died in 1312. His son, Chalabi Amir Arif, succeeded him and passed away in 1320. Two of his half-brothers becoming chiefs of the order after him in succession. Aflaki informed us that he undertook the compilation of his work at the express desire of his spiritual teacher, Chalabi Amir Arif. The preface gives the year Al-Hijra 710, 1310 of the Common Era, as that of its commencement, and the colophon at the end mentions 754, 1353 of the Common Era, as the date of its completion. He thus spent 43 years in his labor of love. The copy used for the present translation was written in Al-Hijra 1027, or 1617 of the Common Era, and belongs to the Library of the Indian Office, being numbered 1670. It is a quarto volume of 291 numbered folios of 2 pages each folio and 23 lines in each page. It is subdivided into a preface of 2 folios and 10 chapters of very different lengths. Thus, the Acts of Bahauddin Beled Sultan al-Ulema, 14 folios; Acts of Sayyid Sidr-Dan Burhanuddin Tirmizi, 5 folios; Acts of Mevlana Jalaluddin Hamid, 155 folios; Acts of Shamsuddin Tabrizi, 23 folios; Acts of Sheikh Salahuddin Zerkub, 11 folios; Acts of Husamuddin Khalifa of God, 14 folios; Acts of Mevlana Bahauddin Sultan Beled, 13 folios; Acts of Chalabi Amir Arif, 45 folios; Acts of Chalabi Amir Abid, 6 folios; 2 genealogical folios, and 288 in full. The work contains many hundreds of anecdotes related to Aflaki by trustworthy reporters whose names are generally given, and a few for which he vouches himself as an eyewitness. Every anecdote is the account of a miracle wrought by the living or the dead, or is the narrative of some strange or striking event. It is, in fact, a species of the Acts of the Apostles of the Mesnevi Dervish Fathers, and is a rare specimen of what a fervent religious enthusiasm can invent or exaggerate, pious credulity can believe, and confiding ignorance accept. In these days of Christian spiritualism, let not the reader be overshocked at learning that the Muslim saints, lovers of their Creator and beloved by Him in return, hold themselves and are held by their dervish brethren to be the successors and spiritual inheritors of the prophets, from Adam to Muhammad. In the virtue of this spiritual communion with God, they know all the secrets and mysteries of the heavens and earth. So said, and not only suspend or overrule the laws of nature at their will, but also deal out death or disease by their anger, health or prosperity by their blessing, the whole in strict accordance, however, with the eternal will and foreknowledge of Him by whom alone all things are made. The anecdotes translated are chosen as being characteristic of various points of dervish credence or assertion. Most of them inculcate some moral truth or point of practical wisdom. A few will be found, however, to go far beyond the credible, and 1 or 2, unless totally misunderstood by the translator, are simply and grossly blasphemous. These last are here given as specimens of the exaggerated dervish doctrines which cause the orthodox among the ulema of Islam to hold all such quasi-religious associations to be more or less heterodox. Now, it's not as much whether you're differing with the main group or not, it's whether it's supported. But the dervishes of Islam appear to be a kind of Gnostics. They style themselves poor, impassioned, adepts, imperfect in many respects. Their doctrines correspond with those of Buddha, Pythagoras, and Plato, making all souls that are destined to salvation to be emanations from the divine light or glory of God, in which they will be again congregated and all those doomed to perdition to have been formed out of the fire of his wrath, to which also they will eventually be consigned. It is but too patent to the translator that he is bound to sue for the kind of indulgence of our critical public in offering them the present volume in verse. He has no claim to being a poet himself, and had never practiced the art of metrical composition until very lately, sensible himself to the earnestness of thought and beauty of diction embedded in the writings of the great poets of Islam, and keenly aware of the condition of dry bones to which the literal prose translation almost always reduces a songster's numbers. He has preferred to clothe his author in a presentable garb, though it be but a crumpled wrap, rather than exhibit him to readers of taste as a mangled mass, stripped of all beauty, and in great measure divested even of cognizable form, through the conflict of dictions and diversities of ideas. He is in the position of the raindrop sung by Sa'di, chapter 3, number 14, of the Adepts, says more, and mentioned of old by Chardin, Addison, and Sir William Jones. May the thoughts in the Mesnevi be the gems that will make his effort acceptable to the British public. At most he is but the driver who risks extinction in hope that he may have a chance to offer an acceptable pearl of price for those whom he has worked. Kilbourne Priory of London, 1880, says, a raindrop from a cloud distilled, at sea's expanse with tremor filled, mused where the main rolls, am I aught? In ocean's presence, sure I'm not. Itself thus eyed with scorn profound, in oyster's bosom nurture found. Time's wheel wrought changes manifold, rich pearl of price, the raindrops told. Meek modesty, its prize received, by naught's gate entering, worth achieved. And selected anecdotes from the work entitled The Acts of the Adepts, Mena Kabul Rafin by Shamsuddin Ahmed El Aflaki will be continued in the next program here.